Welcome to episode 3 of the RunnerBois Podcast. I'm Hayden Pretty, and I'm joined by my co-host, Gavin Atkinson, and special guest, Josh Cornett. We have several things to talk about today, so without further ado, let's jump right in. But before we start, Josh, introduce yourself for the people that don't already know you.
Hey guys, I'm Josh Cornett. I am a physical therapist out of Huntsville, Alabama. I've been running most of my life. I ran a couple of years in college at Freed-Hardeman in West Tennessee, and kind of ended up down in the South. Started doing marathons in college because we had a track team, and started kind of going from there. So since then, I've ran 9 marathons, probably 14, 15 ultras, up to the 100-mile distance a couple times. Goals for this spring are some fast 50Ks up to 100K.
Heck yeah. For our first topic of the day, it's overcoming the wall, staying mentally strong when you feel physically weak. Gavin, we'll start with you.
All right, so I feel like the wall is often something you talk about in marathons. I've never ran one, but I've heard the experience of getting to mile 22, 23-ish, and all of a sudden your body just starts giving out on you. So I can't really speak of it from that sense. The way I look at each distance is it's split into 3 parts for me. There's the first maybe 2/3 where it's a pace that you can maintain because you've been training to be able to maintain that pace. So it's not really pushing all the way to your limit. After a certain point, your body reaches a point where that pace no longer becomes maintainable, and it's something that you're having to push through as lactic is starting to build in your legs. Then there's the part where you start kicking because you're close enough to the finish line where you can't really feel anything anymore. Before I start the race, I always sit there and mentally picture, okay, for a 5K, miles 1 and 2 should be fine. I should be able to get through those fine. For me, I like to sit down and visualize, okay, I'm going to hit mile 2, and after that, I am going to start struggling. There's no amount of training that can stop me from feeling pain and struggling past that point. Mentally accepting that, okay, this pain is going to come. I'm expecting it, so it's not going to catch me off guard. And I know through my training and workouts that it's something that I can push through. It's just having that mental belief and not letting it catch me off guard is what helps me deal with getting through the wall.
Yeah, that's good. What are your thoughts on it, Josh?
Yeah, I think I kind of agree with that, kind of twofold. I think a lot of it comes down to just preparation. Really, at the end of the day, overcoming the wall is just kind of what you put in before you get to race day. Obviously, there's a lot of physical side of things where if you don't do the work, you're going to hit a wall a lot sooner than others. You're less likely to get over that wall. Being headstrong in the work ethic going up to race day, whether it's a 5K or whether it's a 50-miler. I mean, there's always that level of you have to be prepared for it. But the other aspect of it truly is just your headspace. Obviously, in a 5K, I think body wins over mind sometimes. Maybe even on the track, if you're not ready and you get that lactic acid buildup and you're burning, you're gonna crash and burn a little bit. It's like I said, the marathon and up, I think you see it more grit and kind of truly finding the way to the body's gonna hurt, yeah, but are you actually gonna have to slow down? So I think there's a little bit of exchange there from those faster races, 5K, 10K, even a half marathon maybe, and then marathon, 50K, and then the 100-miler. I mean, on those races, it's just suck. It's gonna suck. It's gonna suck. But how long is it going to suck? We're going to find out. And so kind of putting your head down in the dirt and keep on moving. You got to be mentally headstrong. I think that's, some people get it naturally. But I think some people, you got to have to learn that as a skill. And the more you do it, the better you get at it.
Yeah, I like that take. I think part of overcoming that wall is honestly gaslighting yourself, telling you that, it's going to be okay, or just make it to the next mile. When you envision it as a quarter mile or a mile at a time rather than the entire race, and it be more about running in the present rather than just trying to get finished, you can honestly find enjoyment in the suffering. And that's how pro athletes are able to run 110 plus miles a week, is because they're used to it, and they don't have to tell themselves, I have to get through with this. They're like, I get to do this for a living. When you go into things with that mindset, it makes it easier for you to do hard things. Don't think of it as a chore. Think of it as I get to do this rather than I have to do this. I think another way is by prioritizing your running into your schedule. If you're very serious about running, so not putting it off till the end of the day, making time for it, being intentional, and making a training plan, whether that be yourself or something you found online or a coach. That is part of not burning out, because you might not even get to that place of feeling like you're up against the wall. When your training is consistent, it's less likely to happen because you're not just running aimlessly. You don't feel as burnt out as quickly when you are more intentional about that. So that's my take on it. So our next question kind of goes hand in hand with this last question. Our second topic is recovery. When do we push our bodies and when do we learn to rest? Gavin, we'll start with you.
I want to preface this by saying I'm a little bit biased because I have been injury prone before. The second my body starts feeling off, I'm more of a immediately step off the gas. I know that there's some people that's whenever they start feeling aches and pains, more of I'll just train through it and do a little bit more recovery on the side, things like rolling out and stretching. I'm personally more of whenever something feels off, I immediately start backing down on mileage, just trying to make sure I can work through whatever pain I'm dealing with at the time. I think an important part of this sport is just listening to your body and knowing that when you're at your limit, when you push over that, your body will tell you that. It's going to tell you somewhere in there that you're going too hard. Really, it's up to you if you listen to it or not. But usually if you don't listen to it, you'll get hurt. That's not worth it at all. So my advice is just listen to your body because it will tell you when you're going too hard. Like I said, don't let this idea of, I have to do every single run on my training plan or else I will fail. No, you'll fail if you get injured and you can't race. You won't fail if you miss a run or two because you're letting your body have extra time to recover, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's really good. What about you, Josh?
Man, this is my bread and butter. I'm a physical therapist, so this is what I do every day. We treat a lot of runners where I'm at. Probably 67% of our clients are runners in Huntsville. But recovery is all about what we're doing. So we can kind of take this twofold. Like I said, you got to listen to your body, and that's kind of the key point of it. Overtraining is rampant in runners because we like to run. And we don't like doing all the other things that require us to get better. So you can keep it at a base level and think about, what are the essentials? I'm a big advocate for nutrition and being on top of all that. Are we getting our carbohydrates in while running? There's some really good studies coming out that, we talk about protein. Obviously, you have protein back in your systems, but just getting carbohydrates back in your system within 20, 30 minutes after a run really give you an added benefit to performance the next day. So if you're missing those windows of you're not getting the carbs back in, you're not getting the protein back in within that window of a session of a hard workout or just a normal run, your performance is going to go downhill the next day, but also it might skew the next few days. So it's this negative cascade you get if you're missing out on those simple things. So nutrition is kind of paramount when it comes to recovery because it's just kind of everything in our makeup. But then all the other things that go on to that, like I said, we can be proactive with, it's soft tissue work. Obviously, I'm a PT, so we do a lot of things like dry needling, cupping, T-card, different things like that, which not everyone has access to. But a massage gun, a foam roller to keep the soft tissue kind of loosened up. More than that, it's all the other routines. It's your mobility work. It's your stretching. It's your strength training. If you do those things, you don't necessarily have to worry about your recovery quite as much because your body's more apt and ready to handle the stress you put on it. Running, exercise, any of these sports, it's all this idea of tissue tolerance and overload. You have to figure out what that level is you can reach. And if you're doing all these things to set yourself up to prepare you for success, then you're kind of more apt not to have to worry about too much. But obviously, tissue and load management. Obviously, you can't do 4 speed workouts a week. You can't do high mileage every single day. You have to build it up. You have to kind of progress it. So right now, the big thing is the burrito. What's it called? The burrito mile. I think Chattanooga's doing one, right? These guys are doing 30 miles a day just so they can win, Taco Bell or whatever it is for a year. The guys out in Colorado are doing 100 miles a day for the next 30 days. That's extreme. Obviously, we're not all built to do that. We have to figure out where your tissue's at, load it appropriately, and do the things to make sure you can progressively load it more and more.
And I have a follow-up question. Is there any way to tell where your tissue's at, or is that just saying that it's just feeling where your limit's at, kind of?
That's a good question. So you can tell, like you said, you mentioned it. Your body's going to talk to you. We had this big conversation when we have clients that are like, is this a niggle or is this an injury? And from that perspective, you think about an injury's no, it hurts. I can't move. I can't run. I can't jump. I can't load. Yeah. If you're an athlete, you're going to have aches and pains. I wake up some mornings, I go for a run, man, my hip is not happy today. A mile and I'm fine. Or my Achilles or my patellar tendon. I'm not that old. I'm 31, but I'm starting to have these pains when I wake up in the morning and I go run in the early and it's cold outside. So understanding your body, knowing that hey, if I get done with a run or a workout and I'm still uncomfortable or I'm uncomfortable 2 hours later, that's not good. That's probably a problem when you work on. So I think about it how do I feel before I run? How do I feel when I'm running? And then how do I feel the next day or a little bit after I run? It's probably just a little bit of a niggle. Go work on it and see if it goes away.
Yeah, going off what he said. So in weightlifting, they call it progressive overload. That's really essential for building muscle and things like that. But people don't really apply that to running. That's always been a big thing for me. For runners, we should progressively overload, gradually increasing and decreasing in mileage. Pretty well known, but what's not well known is if you're doing the same workouts, the same reps, at the same speed, you might maintain fitness or get a little bit faster, but you're not really going to increase it a lot, because if you're trying to get faster and you're doing mile repeats at the same pace, it doesn't really make any sense if you're trying to improve your mile time, because as you gradually get faster, you should do your workouts faster. So I think progressively overloading, like I used to do mile repeats at like 6 minutes, and if I still did that to this day, I would be running like a 19-minute 5K or something like that, because that's around what that is. But I dropped down to like 5:10 for my reps. I was able to get even faster than that. I did a 15:43 time trial. It just goes to show that progressively overloading in running is essential. And as far as listening to your body goes, I was always taught that you should push yourself to the point where it feels like you're starting to get hurt, and then you cut it off. That sounds like a hot take, but it's just about pushing your body beyond what it is used to doing, but without going too far. There's a very fine line, and that is what elite athletes are training at. The reason they don't really get injured but are able to train so hard and so much is because they have found that fine line between uncomfortable and injury. Also, another thing is, a lot of people say that running is just putting one foot in front of the other. But to me, it's so much more than that. It is good to simplify it, but at the same time, it's about recovery. It's about nutrition, like Josh said. If you're not doing all those things and you're just purely running, you'll get burnt out pretty easily. You're bound to have injury. You have to invest in the right shoes. You have to think about, okay, how am I going to train based on this race? Because a lot of people just go out there and they're like, I'm going to train this and I'm going to run at this pace, and they don't really even have that much of a difference between their easy runs and their workouts. Like, their pace is like 20-30 seconds from each other, which it should be more like minute and a half at least. So I think differentiating your workouts from your easy runs, focusing on other things, and learning to embrace the pain but also listen to your body at the same time are the main ways that you can push yourself without going too far. Our third topic is more just opinion based. So what is the most overrated and underrated piece of running advice, guys? Start with you, Gavin.
I'll start with overrated. I think the most overrated piece of running advice is that every single one of your easy runs has to be at a slow, easy pace. So this is definitely I guess you could say controversial, because there's this whole idea of like your easy runs need to be slow, zone 2, low heart rate. I agree with that for the most part, but I think there is also an argument to be made for, you go out there, say it's maybe cold and you're just feeling really good one day and you just want to like go a little bit faster than normal. I don't think you shouldn't be allowed to do that just because you're throwing away an easy run, because you're pushing a little bit harder than easy. I mean, to me, that just doesn't make sense to have to purposely run a certain pace every single run and have like no variety between your runs. Because it's like, when I think of my easy pace, I don't think of like one set number. I think of more like a range. Like, if I'm feeling good, it's like this fast. Yeah. If I'm feeling not as good, it's back here. Versus it all needs to be back here. It all needs to be slow. I think most underrated is doing strides. I think strides have a lot of benefit. I think people don't talk about them enough. It's seen more as I'll just do them occasionally, not for any reason, just because why not do them? As opposed to like building them into your training in a way that actually makes sense and benefit to you. Because they take like 10 minutes max to do, and you can get a lot of benefit in your form and your max speed and that sort of stuff from it. So I would definitely say that's the most underrated piece of training advice.
Yeah, that's good. I especially like what you said about the first part, that easy is more relative. It can variate, so it's not like a set, 8-minute pace or 7:30. I think what you were trying to get to is that depending on day to day, easy can mean multiple things.
Yeah.
Josh, what are your thoughts?
My immediate thought kind of went similar to the kind of the easy runs, and that's the 10% rule. I think it's trash. I think there's a certain level where, like, yeah, you don't want to, you talked about progressive overload when you're talking about recovery, which is super important, but it's such a dumb number to stick with. And, we have to make these running plans that are like, slowly progressing. If you're starting at 10 miles, 10% is not much. There's a certain upper limit where that kicks in. And obviously it's going to vary from person to person. But if you're an experienced athlete of any kind and you're getting into running, 10% is probably too slow. And you're going to take a long time to progress. So I think, you have to vary the workouts. You have to do all the other stuff, easy runs, sure, long runs, track workouts, special workouts, like vary the workouts, vary the load you're doing. But just doing 10% mileage increase every week, I think it's too slow for a lot of people. They don't make much progress very quickly, and then they get like tired and they get bored of running. That's my take on the 10% rule, which is probably sounds crazy from a PT, but I'm a coach too, so I do a little bit of both. I have one more thought about what you said about, easy pace, heart rate. So I've started doing a Chorus armband, which has been fantastic. Wrist heart rate is trash. So if you're going off of your wrist heart rate for your zones, you're wrong.
Right.
especially in the winter. For me, like if I forget my armband, I have my wrist space heart rate. My hands get cold, my arms go numb. I think it goes off by cadence. Like my resting heart rate on easy runs are like 140. I mean, I can go down to like 730 pace some days at 130 at 140 and feel super comfortable, like super low zone two. I wear a wrist based metric and it'll be like 165, 170. A little asterisk on there. So if you go off heart rate monitors, get a good heart rate monitor. Don't wear a wrist based one, especially like Apple, and those ones are terrible. So that's my opinion. But anyways,
Yeah.
so I would say underrated is hills, and I think that comes from being a more of a trail runner now. My performance has gone significantly up since I started being more aggressive with hill work, and not just hills to do hills, but tackling hills. So we go hard down hills to just beat your quads up, and that way, when you get into those times where your quads are tired and ready, they can know what that stimulus is. There's some cool stuff. I'm a big fan of David Roach. I listen to him a lot, but he's a big guy. Like I tackle down hills because that neurostimulus your quads get is like unparalleled. It replicates a lot of strength training. It replicates a lot of power work, and you do it a couple times, and your body's ready for when you have it. So up hills and down hills, I think you got to tackle them both, and I don't think enough people do that. They like flat, and flat does not get you faster.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And for my overrated take, I think that people who say you shouldn't race once a week, that you should only race like once a month or things like that, I think that's just wrong. You should focus on an intentional race about once a month or so, but running local 5Ks or things like that at a tempo to mostly all out effort every week or every other week is not like terrible for you, especially if you're in like base building phase and you're just trying to get some solid like speed work in, like doing a local 5K while you're training for a half or something like that. Like a lot of people say that that's like killing your progress or things like that, but I don't think that's true. I think it gives you some solid experience. It's just fun. Like if we never ran races, I feel like running would get very boring. Running races as much as you can. I mean, you can still overdo it. Some people say that you should only do like 5 or 6 races a year. And they're only talking about like 10Ks or halves. They're not even talking about like ultra marathons. That's my overrated.
Anyone who says that has not been in a cross country season before.
Right?
Pretty sure we have a race like every week for like months
Or
straight.
sometimes 2 times a week, right?
Yeah, like
Yeah. And as for underrated goes, I would say it's a 2-part thing. So the first part would be strength training, like core and weights. And my second part would be running on different terrain. A lot of people only run on roads or only run on track. And I feel like unless you're training for like Olympic 5K or 10K or marathon, I feel like running on trails, at least occasionally, even if you're not a trail runner, can benefit you, especially strength training, doing specific workouts. So with weights, I normally do 3 times a week, and then core 2 or 3 days a week. So I normally do about 5 or 6 days a week of strength training total, with a day or 2 off. And so what I do during those days is weight training normally means a little bit of legs, functional training, specifically for running, not just lifting heavy weights. And then for core, not just doing crunches and things like that. Studies show that that's one of like the most overrated exercises for you. It helps with maybe shape of abs. It has nothing to do with functional core, which is needed more for running. So doing intentional core work 2 or 3 times a week, functional core work such as like flutter kicks and things like that. I've read that that's very beneficial for runners. Focusing more on functional core rather than just like, I want a 6-pack. Those are very different exercises. So I can't really stress the importance enough of having a strong core. If you're watching this video, you've probably been told that, but you might be doing the wrong exercises because there's 2 different types, like I just said, functional and stability and things like that, and then just ones that like are just
aesthetic.
right. But yeah, that's my take. So for our 4th topic, Gavin, do you think elite running is entirely genetic, or do you think it also takes a certain level of hard work? I mean, obviously athletes do train very hard that are elite, but do genetics play a huge role, or is it not as important as hard work?
So I think running is one of those things where, yes, genetics plays a role, but it's not as big of a factor. Running is a sport where anyone can do it. It's not like basketball where it's like, if you're not tall, you're already at a disadvantage. That's not saying you can control. That's genetic. Some other sports where it's like how your body is built plays a huge factor. I think in running, it's one of those things where how tall, how short you are, how your body is built, stuff like that doesn't impact your performance as much. I used to have a quote in my Strava. I don't have it anymore. I have something different now, but I used to say hard work is greater than talent because I believe that anyone can work to get to a certain level, and anyone who wants to put in the work and effort will beat anyone relying on raw talent any day. And I think for elite running, it's not so much genetics and more of these people started when they were like 3-4 years old and just have been running their entire lives, and just stacking years upon years of training has gotten them to the point they're at today, and less of they were genetically gifted, and that is what allowed them to be great, if that makes sense.
All right. So I'm kind of the opposite. I think there is, especially when we talk about like truly the upper level of the elite, and not like just like the top 0.001% of like Olympians, but just like the people we see on the stage, whether it's, cross country, high school nationals, regionally, like NCAAs, that kind of stuff. I think there's a pretty heavy, like, these guys were meant to run. I see that in a lot of sports too. Like, we see soccer players, we see basketball players that if they had trained in soccer, they would probably be pretty good at a different sport. Or they had trained in basketball and they're soccer players, they might be pretty good. Running, I think, the same way. I think running is still viewed in a lot of obviously of the world as a whole, but US is like a secondary sport. It's growing. Track and fields and all that kind of stuff is growing. We don't necessarily get the best athletes in our sports, but I still think because of that, like hard work shows up quite a bit. So you get these guys that are maybe not the star basketball players, not the star football players that have some knack for running, and they put in a lot of hard work, and they show up and they end up doing really well, both at state, regional levels, national levels. But when it comes to the guys that are winning these races, the girls that are winning these races, there's a heavy genetic factor. I mean, you can see it locally. I mean, I treat a lot of clients that have kids that run, and they were, top athletes, and then their kids are top athletes. So I do think, I mean, we see it in the evidence of sprinting. I mean, look at all the studies they've seen on, North Africans. There's a book, Runner's Gene, I read a long time ago. Like, there's a gene that shows up and expressed in Jamaica, like it's a heavy population of the people that were immigrated there. Those people are meant to sprint, and that's all genetics. Obviously, they had hard work. They had to train too, but hard work will get you a long way. But if you want to be like top, it's genetics.
Yeah, I'm kind of both ways. So I see elite running as mostly genetic, but I think you can get up to at least the sub-elite level just purely off hard work and not great genetics. But I think to become the top 0.1% or even winning like a larger race, like Josh said, it involves at least some level of good genetics. For instance, I grew up with pretty bad asthma, and they told me that I trained it, that it would eventually get better, but it would never truly go away. And so no matter how hard I work, it'll still always be there. Really unfortunate sometimes, and like I get really out of breath during certain workouts and stuff like that. That's not really genetic necessarily. And the truly top athletes, you really do have to be genetically gifted. We talked about this in our last episode. Jane Hedegren, college freshman, 1444. She's out here breaking records as a freshman. 5 years ago, there wasn't even like any woman that was sub 15. I don't think that was just purely based off of hard work. I'm sure she worked extremely hard, but I think that, especially her, that was like a genetic freak. Like, it's crazy to see her running 1444 as a freshman. Like, she could go 1425. So I think genetics play a huge role in elite, but that shouldn't discourage you from picking up running even if you have poor genetics, because you can even become, like I said, sub-elite if you're not genetically gifted. The chances of becoming truly elite with poor genetics is pretty low. Our fifth topic is, how does altitude impact performance? We'll start with you, Gavin.
All right, so I'm just going to be completely honest. I have not trained at altitude. However, I have trained at what's called the poor man's altitude, which is summers here in Mississippi where the humidity is like 80%. And it's like 110 degrees outside. So I'd say that simulates it pretty well. Now, as far as the benefits, I think that being in an environment where there's less oxygen in the air, making it more difficult to breathe. I think during the time, it is a struggle to train in that kind of environment just because your body is not adapted to having that lesser oxygen. So it's like your body gets so used to having a certain amount of oxygen in the air, and then whenever that gets cut down, all of a sudden it's like your body's trying to breathe the same amount, but all of a sudden it's not feeling the same way, so it has to adapt to that. But I think the biggest benefit is that if you spend enough times where your body does adapt to that lower oxygen level, literally as soon as you get back to an area, say you're at altitude and you come back down towards sea level, where all of a sudden the air becomes more oxygen rich, your body is then better equipped to handle that extra oxygen it wasn't used to then, which I believe directly translate into improving performances, because your body now can work with less oxygen than it has. So now that it has more than it needs, it can push harder because it has more energy in store, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty good for not knowing anything about it. What about you, Josh?
Yeah, so kind of getting what Gavin was kind of going after. It's the biggest change is hemoglobin levels. So your body will produce more red blood cells to carry more oxygen because it's getting less. And so it is essentially free blood doping. And so that's the biggest carryover. Obviously, you go back down into a lower altitude, your body's going to hold on to that blood for a while. Obviously, it'll down regulate over the course of a few weeks. That's why CrossFit camps go out to Denver, those high altitude places, get a week of training in. You get a big spike in those levels, and you go back home and you have a decent season to start off. So you can kind of improve your performance. The fun thing is there's some really cool studies coming out on passive heat. So if you have access to a hot tub, if you have access to a sauna, you can get free altitude training without having to
Oh wow.
actually lower your. So it's obviously not the same extent of being at 6,000 plus feet or even 10,000 feet. So you can get out to some fun places like Leadville. I don't have the studies off the top of my head, but they're easy to find online. But some stuff coming out showing that 2 to 3 days a week in a hot tub or a sauna can improve hemoglobin levels by like 2 to 3%, I think, which is pretty significant.
Wow.
And so you can carry that forward. You can have 4 minutes altitude of humidity and also some, if you have access to a sauna, a little bit of some funner stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, I gotta hit my gym sauna up for that. But yeah, it's interesting to see all these athletes that move to Colorado and stay there for an extended period of time. The consistency with these athletes is they all have like a freakish amount of endurance. Normally, a lot of them aren't necessarily 5K, 10K runners. A lot of them are marathon and ultra runners that end up moving to Colorado and places like that at elevation. Correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like high school, college teams, stuff like that do shorter distances don't stay up there for more than a couple weeks. There's not many younger athletes that stay there for an extended period of time. It's more like endurance based, which might be consistent with lactic threshold and VO2 max and those levels at altitude and things like that, because I don't remember exactly where Matt Carpenter was from, but he has the highest recorded VO2 max ever for a runner at 92, and he would do almost all his runs at altitude. He was obviously a big ultra runner, one of the GOATs. Like he said, there's several studies out about that. I would have to ask you this, but is it good for like an extended period of time for someone that's not used to it? Or I've heard things about like people getting sick and stuff like that from that.
I mean, acute sickness only happens when you're above a certain limit. So we don't have any cities that are too high. Most altitude sickness is going to happen around 10,000 plus feet. I mean, there's a few cities out in Colorado. Leadville's a big one. Prolonged, your body's adapts. I mean, it doesn't take too long, usually a few days at altitude, especially if you're living in like Denver or Flagstaff, like those kind of places. I mean, you can adapt to that level, 6 to 8,000 feet within a few days, and then you're good. You're golden. Your body just continues to kind of, that's your new normal. Pretty quick adaptations. So there's really no prolonged illness. And it's only like the acute hypoxia kind of stuff is when you're like mountaineering and you're over 14 to 16. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's good to know. If there was like a performance increase, like an approximate number for running at altitude, what do you think it would be? Closer to like 2 or 3%?
Yeah, 2 to 3% of like altitude training, I think is pretty consistent. It varies person to person a little bit, but the biggest things they see are training at altitude and coming back to sea level. That's where you notice the best bang for your buck. That's why with the Olympics coming to the U.S., was it 2 years for having Olympics here? I mean, LA's a coastal city, so if these people are training altitude, they should do pretty well there. So I'd be curious. Mm-hmm.
All right, so Josh, I have a question for you. As someone who works a full-time job, how do you find time in your life to balance your life and then finding time to train and race as well?
Yeah, I'm going to give you kind of two answers because I have a job now that caters to running. Like I said, I'm a physical therapist and I work at a sports-based clinic, and me and my coworker, my boss, are both very high level kind of ultra runners. So we built into our schedule run blocks and we train together. So we're training partners, which is awesome. Right now it's a little easier than it used to be. But I'll say like when, my first job, I was at just a standard outpatient clinic for about 7 years. It's tough. I mean, there's definitely days when you get done working, 8 hour day and you're like, I don't want to run. Prioritizing, those morning runs, like get it done early before you can go to work. Racing is always another difficult one. Like you end up doing a lot of local races. You don't get to travel quite as much because you take PTO. So it kind of loses its fun a little bit. Finding times and opportunities to get out of your own town and do some racing, do some runs. For me in Huntsville, trying to get to Chattanooga, trying to get to Birmingham, even the local stuff like that. Just it gives you a little variety. I'm not married. I just have a dog annoying me right now. So no kids. So I don't have to worry about like all the life stresses outside of that. It's mostly just, what I want to do. Obviously there's things that pop up. Definitely making a priority. You do what you love. And if you truly love running, you're going to find time to run. And so just keeping it a high priority in my life. So I got a question for you guys. Now that you are getting into this world of podcasting, obviously a runner podcast, What are your goals? What do you want to get out of this? Are you want to stick into kind of one frame of mind? Do you want to explore all worlds of running? And what's some goals for you guys?
Yeah. I think a couple things for me would be discussing running news. So, like, I want to incorporate some sort of like reaction each week to a couple running stories that are like trending. Whatever guests we have on, we have them talk about it. And then I'd love to get some pro runners on the podcast eventually down the line. Third would be that we would have a scientific and fact based podcast that doesn't just like blabber at the mouth, but can fact check what we say. We're scientifically accurate in what we say so that we can give good advice to runners that might be new to it or might not know the specific topic we're talking about, not spreading misinformation and saying stuff correctly based on scientific research.
I want to start this by saying that I started my YouTube channel, say 6 months ago. And when I started it, I came to the realization that through it, I could use my running to not only impact me, but I could also use my experiences and my knowledge to impact and help other people. Through YouTube, I was able to realize how I can inspire and guide people that I've never even like met before. So it's like sometimes on my videos, I see comments from people talking about how what they watched made them motivate or something, and that just like was always something that brought me great happiness, was knowing that I can impact other people's lives through what I do. So through this podcast, I'm hoping to be able to learn about other people's running stories, because like my story can only take me so far, but being able to learn from other people, figure out what other people's experiences with running are, and just being able to use this podcast as a way for people who are maybe looking to get into running to learn more about it and hopefully just get inspired through it.
Thank you so much for watching episode 3 of the RunnerBois Podcast. I'm Hayden Pretty, and I'm joined by my co-host, Gavin Atkinson, special guest, Josh Cornett, with
Return to sport, PT and performance.
If you're in the Huntsville area, make sure to check them out. Thanks for watching.
4,500 on a Hummer, no gas, 89 price on the ticket. Exercise, eat all my vegetables, cause I'm desperately about hit getting.